General Hospital will reveal Lucas's return was not just a simple reunion, it was a storm that tore through Brad's soul, awakening painful memories and desires he had long buried. Once, Lucas had been Brad's entire world, the one person who could make the darkness fade. Even after everything had fallen apart, Brad had clung to the hope that, someday, Lucas would forgive him. He dreamed of a second chance, of a future where the mistakes of the past no longer defined them. But that fragile hope was shattered the moment Marco entered the picture. At first, Brad refused to believe it. Lucas had moved on. With him. Marco was a stranger, an enigma with a carefully composed smile and a presence that unsettled Brad in ways he couldn't explain. It wasn't just jealousy, though that alone burned through him like acid. It was something deeper, an instinctive sense of danger. Marco didn't fit. He didn't belong in Lucas's life. The whispers only fueled Brad's unease. Stories about Marco circulated in hushed voices, half-truths and suspicions that painted him as more than just Lucas's new lover. Some claimed he had ties to criminals. Others suggested he had his own agenda, using Lucas for reasons unknown. There was no proof, nothing Brad could point to with certainty, but he felt it. And that feeling twisted inside him, growing stronger with each passing day. Brad tried to ignore it, tried to convince himself that he could let Lucas go. But every time he saw them together, every smile, every touch, it was like a knife to the heart. The thought of Lucas giving his love to someone else was unbearable. It was wrong. It had to be wrong. And if Lucas was too blind to see the truth, then Brad would make him see. At first, it was just observation. Watching from a distance. Learning their routines. But soon, it wasn't enough. The jealousy, the resentment, the fear, it all became too much. It consumed him, whispered to him, urging him forward. He had lost Lucas once. He would not lose him again. If Lucas truly loved Marco, then what? Would Brad accept it, let them be happy together? The thought sent a sharp, nauseating wave through him. No. That wasn't an option. He had already lost too much, endured too much. If he couldn't have Lucas, then no one could. The realization settled over him like a shadow, dark and absolute. There was no turning back. Brad's obsession deepened until it became an unshakable force, guiding his every move with a singular purpose. Marco had to be exposed, and Lucas had to see the truth. The more he watched, the more he realized that Marco was far from the innocent, loving partner Lucas believed him to be. Determined to uncover the secrets lurking beneath Marco's polished exterior, Brad began trailing his every step. He followed him from work, watched him enter exclusive clubs and high-end restaurants, observed his meetings with people who seemed far removed from the clean-cut world of law. Brad delved deeper, digging into Marco's past with relentless precision. He sifted through financial records, traced old business partnerships, and hacked into sources he once swore he'd never touch again. What he found confirmed his darkest suspicions. Marco had ties to Sidwell, a name that sent a cold shiver down Brad's spine. Sidwell was notorious for his involvement in illicit financial dealings, money laundering schemes, and corporate fraud on a scale that few dared to challenge. The connection between Marco and Sidwell was subtle, buried beneath layers of shell companies and untraceable transactions, but Brad knew how to read between the lines. Marco wasn't just a lawyer. He was an operator in the shadows, someone who moved through the corridors of power with dangerous ease. There were whispers of insider trading, of deals made in smoke-filled backrooms where fortunes changed hands in the blink of an eye. Lucas had no idea who he was dealing with, no idea that the man he trusted, the man he loved, was playing a game far more sinister than he could ever imagine. Brad's anger twisted into something darker, something uncontainable. The fire inside him, once fueled by heartbreak and jealousy, now burned with something else entirely, righteous fury. Marco didn't deserve Lucas. And if Lucas was too blind to see the truth, Brad would have to make him see it. But the rage within him, the desperation clawing at his soul, whispered something else. If you can't have him, no one will. The thought settled into his mind like a seed, taking root, growing with each passing day. Brad was past the point of reasoning, past the point of second-guessing. He had tried to win Lucas back with patience, with longing, with the desperate hope that one day he would look at him the way he used to. But now, that hope was dead. If Lucas chose Marco, if he refused to see the danger before him, then Brad would make sure that neither of them would find happiness. He had lost Lucas once. He would not lose him again. And if that meant tearing everything apart to keep him, so be it. Brad meticulously crafted his plan, ensuring that every move was calculated, every step leading to the inevitable downfall of Lucas and Marco. It wasn't enough to simply tear them apart. He wanted to destroy them, to leave nothing but ruin in his wake. This wasn't just about love or jealousy anymore, it was about vengeance, about making them both suffer the way he had suffered. His first move was subtle, almost imperceptible. He knew that brute force wouldn't work. Lucas was too strong-willed, too stubborn. Instead, Brad decided to poison Lucas's mind from within, planting the seeds of doubt so carefully that Lucas wouldn't even realize he was being manipulated. A casual remark here, a lingering hesitation there, and soon, Lucas found himself questioning Marco in ways he never had before. Brad fed him just enough information to make him curious, but never enough to be outright accusatory. He let Lucas come to his own conclusions, nudging him along a path of uncertainty and mistrust. At the same time, Brad targeted Marco directly. With the damning information he had uncovered, he made his presence known, approaching Marco under the guise of a warning. I know who you really are, he told him, his voice laced with menace. And if Lucas finds out the truth, you'll lose everything. But Marco was no ordinary man. He had built his life on secrets and deception, and he wasn't about to let someone like Brad threaten him. Instead of cowering, Marco struck back. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a strategist, a man who had played far more dangerous games than this. He saw through Brad's manipulations and met him head-on, turning the battle into a war. Every move Brad made, Marco countered with one of his own. When Brad tried to make Lucas doubt him, Marco tightened his grip, ensuring that every doubt was crushed before it could take root. When Brad attempted to use blackmail, Marco dug into his past, unearthing skeletons that Brad thought he had buried long ago. The hunter had become the hunted, and Brad realized, perhaps too late, that he had underestimated his enemy. But if Marco thought he could intimidate Brad into backing down, he was gravely mistaken. The more Marco fought back, the more ruthless Brad became. There was no turning back now, no chance of retreat. This wasn't just about winning anymore. This was about survival. Everything built up to a devastating climax on a cold, moonless night. Brad had spent weeks perfecting his final act, ensuring that there would be no escape, no chance for Lucas and Marco to slip through his fingers. He had played his part well, dropping just enough hints, stirring just enough paranoia, and forging just the right kind of deception to lure them both to the same place, at the same time. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town was the perfect stage. Isolated, forgotten, surrounded by nothing but miles of emptiness. There would be no interruptions. No one to hear the desperate pleas. No one to stop what was about to unfold. Lucas and Marco arrived separately, just as Brad had planned. The cryptic messages he had sent them, disguised as threats from an unknown enemy, had done their job. Lucas, ever the protector, had come prepared to face whatever danger awaited him. Marco, ever the strategist, had come armed with his own calculations, his own precautions. But neither of them expected him. Brad stepped out of the shadows, his face a mask of rage, sorrow, and madness. His hands trembled as he pointed a gun at them, his breath ragged, his mind unraveling at the seams. You took everything from me, he snarled, his voice raw with pain. Lucas, I would have done anything for you. I would have given you the world. And you threw it away. For him. Lucas's eyes widened in horror. He had seen Brad angry before, had witnessed his darker impulses, but this was something else. This was the twisted remains of the man he had once loved, consumed entirely by hatred and obsession. "Brad, listen to me," Lucas said, his voice strained but steady. "This isn't you. You don't have to do this. Whatever you think is happening, we can fix it." "Fix it?" Brad let out a bitter laugh, his grip tightening on the gun. "You think this can be fixed? After everything? After you let him into your life and left me with nothing?" "No, Lucas. There's nothing left to fix." Marco, ever composed, tried to inch closer, his mind already calculating a way out. "Put the gun down, Brad," he said calmly. "You're making a mistake you can't take back." But Brad wasn't listening. The fury inside him had reached its breaking point, an uncontrollable force that had swallowed every last shred of reason. And then, it happened. A scuffle. A desperate attempt to wrestle the gun from Brad's grasp. Lucas lunged, trying to push Marco out of the way, trying to stop the inevitable. But the struggle only lasted seconds before the deafening sound of a gunshot shattered the air. Then another. And another. When the chaos settled, the only thing that remained was the silence. Brad stood frozen, the gun slipping from his hands, clattering to the ground. His breath came in uneven gasps as his mind tried to comprehend the horror before him. Lucas lay motionless, his body twisted at an unnatural angle, his eyes wide open but unseeing. A pool of crimson spread beneath him, soaking into the cold concrete floor. Marco, too, had fallen, his hand still clutching at the wound in his chest as life drained from him. The weight of what he had done crashed down on Brad all at once. He staggered backward, his legs weak, his vision blurred. He had won. Lucas was his now. But in the end, what was left? Nothing. Just the hollow emptiness of a love turned into ruin. Brad stood motionless, his entire body trembling as he stared down at the two lifeless figures sprawled before him. His breaths came in short, ragged gasps, his mind struggling to process the irreversible horror of what he had done. The cold steel of the gun had long since slipped from his fingers, but the weight of his actions pressed down on him like an unmovable force, suffocating him. His eyes, wide and hollow, darted between Lucas and Marco, two men who had once meant everything to him, now reduced to nothing but still bodies and spreading pools of crimson. His knees buckled, and he took a shaky step back, but there was nowhere left to run. The world around him seemed to shrink, the walls of the abandoned warehouse closing in as if sealing his fate. The love that had once fueled his existence, the obsession that had driven him to this moment, it had all led to this gruesome ending. He had wanted Lucas to be his, had wanted to erase Marco from the equation, to reclaim what had been stolen from him. But now, standing in the aftermath of his own destruction, he realized the cruelest truth of all: he had nothing. Lucas was gone. Marco was gone. And he was nothing but a shadow of the man he once was, swallowed whole by the darkness he had allowed to consume him. The wail of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Flashing red and blue lights painted the night outside, illuminating the decayed walls of the warehouse in bursts of flickering color. But Brad did not move. He did not attempt to flee. There was no point. When the police stormed in, weapons raised, ready for a fight, they were met with a sight far more disturbing than any resistance. Brad stood in the center of the blood-soaked floor, his arms hanging limply at his sides, his face void of any expression except for a vacant, haunted stare. He did not flinch as the officers barked orders at him. He did not resist as they seized him, forced him to the ground, bound his hands behind his back. He only stared straight ahead, unseeing, unhearing. He had wanted to destroy Lucas's happiness. Instead, he had destroyed everything. A tragedy had unfolded within these walls, one that had no victors, no justice, no redemption. Only destruction. Only loss. Lucas, Marco, and Brad, 3 lives entangled in a love that had turned to ruin. And in the end, all that remained was the wreckage of their shattered souls, consumed by love, obsession, and the inescapable weight of their own choices. Stay tuned for the upcoming chapters as the consequences of Brad's actions begin to unravel. His descent into darkness has led him to the ultimate point of no return, but the story is far from over. What awaits him now is a reckoning, a brutal confrontation with the weight of his choices, the inescapable grasp of guilt, and the justice that may or may not be served. As the police drag him away from the blood-soaked warehouse, sirens wailing in the night, questions remain unanswered. Will he plead insanity, or will he accept the full force of the law? Will he be consumed by regret, or will he justify his actions in the twisted logic of his broken mind? The legal battle ahead will be fierce, but no prison sentence could ever match the torment of knowing that he destroyed the only person he had ever loved. Meanwhile, the world around him does not stop. Lucas and Marco's deaths send shockwaves through their friends, families, and colleagues. Lucas's loved ones, those who had once supported him and trusted Brad to care for him, are left shattered by grief and betrayal. Marco's past, his hidden connections and dangerous dealings, might not have died with him. His secrets may still come back to haunt those left behind. But most of all, the ghost of what once was will never leave Brad. Every night in his cell, he will hear the echoes of Lucas's last words, see the terror in his eyes, feel the weight of Marco's silent defiance. No matter where he ends up, behind bars, in an institution, or left to rot in the abyss of his own conscience, he will never escape the horror of what he has done. And perhaps, the darkest twist is yet to come. Is this truly the end for Lucas and Marco? Or is there something lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? Don't miss the next chapters, where the fallout of Brad's obsession will unfold in ways no one could have predicted. The road to destruction may have ended, but the story of its consequences is only just beginning.